Cool. Hi, everyone. So yes, I'm going to share my screen for a bit so you all can see more information. All right. Cool. So yes, as Laura said, I am the reading tutor. So you can see here, the kids know me as Miss Michelle. So I have that on there. You all will have probably your title that you already, like she said, many of you already work with us, but if you haven't already, you'll probably have what you go by for the students, Mr. Mr. Yes, and Laura gave us a nice little overview of AHC. I'll just be going through a few tips and tricks from the last year and a half that I've been working one-on-one with students. So you all will be working hopefully one-on-one, or maybe a few of you one of you and a few students. And I have some tips and tricks because, like I said, I was new a year ago and I didn't know how this would all be, but now I've learned a lot, so I'm going to share that with you. So the main things I want to go over are reading comprehension. So we've had a lot of our staff say that that's the main thing that students need help with. So you might read a story with them, and then if you ask them what happened in the story, they'll be like, I'm not really sure, like, I don't remember. So trying to make sure they comprehend, like, not only are they reading, but they're actually remembering what they're reading. Sight words, I don't know if you all know what those are, but we will go through those, and it's good for each student to know what they are, and they're by grade level, and I'll show examples. And then iReady, we'll just touch on briefly. It's a reading software and something we use to test and give a diagnostic to see where the students are at, but also they do 30 to 45-minute lessons every week. So, and then at the end, I'm hoping this will be the part that takes the most time, is the Q&A. I'm sure you all have questions. So rather than me just tell you how it goes, I'm hoping you all have ideas or have already worked with students and or things that you're wondering about the program or how it is to work one-on-one or with a small group of students. So here for reading comprehension, like I said, this is the main thing we're working on as far as having the students learn what they're reading. So when you grab a book, like I said, just grab a book, and sometimes a student has a book. Hopefully they have a book in their backpack, but sometimes they don't have any books. But luckily at all the sites, we have plenty of books. And sometimes selecting the book can be part of the process. They might pick a book that's too hard for them, maybe one that's too easy, but we're just excited that they're grabbing a book or there's something they want to read. And if they're with you, they're most likely excited to read it with you. And so since you're reading it with them, you'll be able to read it with them, and then you can go through words that are unfamiliar and things like that. And I showed this little cube here. Some of you might have been to some of the sites and have seen this before, but there are literacy kits that come with 2 books and this little cube, which, as you can see here, it talks about. Mine's a little squished because it's been in my backpack. I use this a lot. But you can roll this with the kids and then be like, okay, what was the beginning, middle, and end of the story? So it's nice to use. I usually read the book first and then have the students do this part. And sometimes you have to read these words because, as you can see, some of these words are kind of bigger. So depending on the age of the student, they might be like, what's a setting? What's a problem? What's a solution? So explaining that to the student, and most importantly, pausing while you read. Some of the staff have mentioned that, like, we love what you guys do. Thank you so much. But it's different than just reading a book to a student. It's pausing, taking time to ask questions, and making sure they're following along with the story. So yeah, I just showed this. Like I said, these are at most of the sites have these, but if not, you can remember like some of these things on your own, and you can ask them like, hey, what happened in the story? What's the main idea? Things like that. And then these are sight words. So like I said, if you're not sure what these are, this is what they're teaching now for reading. Each grade has one. So I just showed here 1st through 5th grade. There are no sight words that we use for kindergarten. So for kindergarten, you'll probably be working on learning letters and spelling and things like that. But here, the sight words, there's different ones for each grade. So the goal is that by the end of the grade, they'll know all 100. So that might be intimidating for a student. And sometimes you'll be working with a student and they might not know any of these words. And that's okay. We're working on it. And as we've said, there's such a need for you all because some of these students are 2 to 3 grade levels behind. So any practice you do with them and any like showing up every week is what's important, because the consistency of you coming there, like some of these students don't have anyone to read with them at home or practice words with them. So even this, something that it might seem simple. And also I've zoomed in here just so you see, like, this is the first 100. So just practicing words, like you might be like, oh, these are some easy words. Like, yeah, for you, they're easy, but for these students, that might be the first time they're seeing it. So repeating them just every week, doing a few words every week. And then like, hopefully the goal is that they'll learn them over time, but just being repetitive. You can have them practice spelling it, just, asking them and then they spell it. Or if you have a writing utensil, something to write, like, okay, let's write this, and then writing it a bunch of times. There's also flashcards at all the sites, I believe. And there's also different games that have sight words. Like there's one that has, it's like a fly swatter game, and you like swat the sight word when you see it and you have students read it. So there's different games at all the sites. So if you are done reading a book and you want to work on sight words, or if you want to do some sight words and then reading, sometimes I let the student choose. I'm like, all right, we're going to do both of these things. Do you want to do sight words or reading and sight words? So giving the student a choice sometimes if they are not willing to, which a lot of our students have a great attitude, so that should not be a problem for you all. And I just wanted to touch on iReady. Like I said, this is what we use to test the students to see where they're at. Obviously, it's not the only way to tell if someone's a good reader, but as you can see in this first part here, there's different colors of the pyramid, so we can tell if the student's on grade level, behind, and what they're behind at. So we actually have data on all of that. So if you guys have questions on like, what should I be working on? Like, you can get more involved if you want, but also any reading is good practice. So you don't really need to know about iReady. I just wanted you all to know this is what we use with the students. This is what it looks like for them. They have lessons that they do, and we have a goal of 30 to 45 minutes each week. So every site does this, and every student has an iReady account, and they work on this. And then any questions? So I know that was a lot of information. Like I said, it'll make more sense probably if you're already working with students, or if you're going to work with students. It's really rewarding and exciting, but I'm sure there's lots of questions you all may or may not have. So how can I help answer those questions?
This is Lori. Can I go ahead? I don't know if you're...
Sure, go ahead.
When you say reading, are you having the kids read out loud with you, or are you reading to the kids?
Great question, Lori. So you can do both. Depends on the student. Sometimes they want to read it to you, and sometimes I take turns. Like sometimes they'll be like, oh, can I read this whole book? And I'm like, okay. And so if they can read it and they're doing fine, like let them read, that's great. But if you want to help them, sometimes you might like, they do a page, you do a page. So that's up to you how you want to do that. Just no matter if they read to you or you read to them or both, make sure to pause and ask questions and things like that. But some of the students are really excited to show you, like, I can read this whole book, and they'll read the whole book to you. So
right. Well, I will say that I've been having the kids read out loud with me.
Great.
This week it was one young girl. 2 weeks ago it was 2 kids doing it with me.
Great.
I even feel like she's improved since we did stuff on Zoom together last year, because I felt she was behind, and I think she's much better. So I do pause as I go. And for instance, they're kind of leaden sometimes when they read. And then I said, what are quotation marks? What does that mean? And he's like, somebody's saying something. I said, well, to help the reader, you might think about how you say that so that they realize that somebody's saying something. And she did that this week. I was like, oh my gosh. So I think engaging with them is definitely a good idea, and encouraging them. And she was pretty excited, I think, to be reading. And
yeah, no, that's
she was better,
That's a great point. No, and they love praise. I mean, any praise or affirmation. The great thing about you coming back is like you even remember from virtual to now. Like I also worked virtually last year, and now it's in person. So seeing the improvement is very exciting for us. Like, oh, you remembered this. Like that's so great. And telling them that, because like they might not hear that praise all the time. So like, oh, good job. Like you remembered this thing. So also all the sites probably have stickers if you want, but lately I've been giving stickers out, and students love stickers. So yeah, anything that, even if it's just verbal praise, but if you want prizes, the sites have things you can be like, oh, they did a great job doing this. So even something as small as a sticker, like that's great feedback. Thank you, Lori. Does anyone else have any questions? Any comments? Yeah. Okay.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. I'm in high school,
Okay.
and I'm just wondering how I would log service hours.
Great question. I think will Laura know this?
I can take that question. So when you come to volunteer, you will, hopefully this is true at all of the centers, that everybody signs in on the nights that they're there, and our staff record that. We've got a database with the volunteers and your hours in it. So you can ask the person, your main contact at the center, and then they can do it for you, or they can ask me, and I can either do a letter or do a printout of the exact days and hours that you were there. So it's very easy for us to track, and we're happy to support students who are doing community service. So thank you.
Yes, and we appreciate you doing it.
Thank you.
I do have another question. Are the kids learning phonics? Because one of the other things I'm doing when they look at a word and they don't know what it is, I say, sound it out. And then I don't know if they really know what that means or how to sound out a word, based on looking at certain letters that are S and H together and things like that.
So that's a great question. I believe they are. And like usually when you tell them sound it out, most of them can do that. Some of them might say they don't know how, or they might struggle with remembering all the letter sounds. So you can I'll like split the word up for them. I'm like, okay, what's this part and this part? Because sometimes if they see the whole word, they're like, I don't know what that is, but that's a good point. Yeah. Splitting it up and like sounding it out. And you can even practice, like if you all wanted to, or if you know all the phonemes, there's like 40 for phonemes in the English language, so just practicing all the sounds of all the letters. I know when I first started, I was like, do I know all the sounds of all the letters? So like practicing that, like most of them, like if you say like, oh, what does the A sound make? They'll be like, A, apple, and things like that. So some of them know that and some of them might not, but you could practice that too.
And I have a question. I've only been doing this for a few weeks now. And I found the kids that I have worked with they're all good about picking out a book that they want and bring it to me. But when we start reading, but I find about at least by the middle of the book, if not sooner, their attention starts to flag and they seem like, are they bored or they get distracted, want to go do something else. So do you have tips for, how do you bring someone's attention back to the book, or do you just say, okay, let's pick another book? Or
That's a great question. So yes, attention is something we're struggling, and I think it's probably worse after COVID now. Like these students are so used to going to do whatever they want. So like I said, I bring stickers now and I'll be like, oh, you'll get a sticker if we pay attention. So like, so far I've been able to finish books with students, but sometimes I'm like, okay, if this book isn't that interesting, do you want to try something else? But also like, it depends on the book. I think once they get into it and they understand, sometimes they're like, oh, I want to know what happens next. So like asking like, oh, what do you think will happen on the next page? But that's a great point. Like their attention, it's hard, to keep them focused, but maybe bringing it back to the book, or as long as they're reading, like if they don't finish a book ever, as long as they're reading, like if they do move to another book, that's great. But if they want to go do something else, like, oh, we have to finish reading before we can go do that. So I don't want to say bribe them, but yeah, you can be like, oh, if we do 10 more minutes of there, sometimes they want to know the time, like, oh, how much is left of this book or how much is left of time. So you can be like, okay, when that clock says this, or when it's this time, or if we finish this page, we can do this part next week. So I think knowing that you'll be there every week, we're like, okay, we have to finish it or else we'll have to do it next time. So sometimes I think that helps, but that is a good question because their attention is hard. Jane, did you have a question?
Yes, I'm already volunteering at Gates of Boston with elementary schools in the afternoon after school program, and I'm a little confused. Is Reading Buddies a separate program, or is that just something we do when we're there? I mean, it sounds are they two separate programs, or is it one? Just
great question. I think it's something we're trying to start, right, Laura? If I'm not mistaken, like some of you are already volunteering at the site. So while you're there, you're working on worksheets, homework. But if the students don't have homework, we can always use more reading buddies. So if that's however you want to split up your hour of time with the students, if you want to read with them more, or if some of you want to devote your time just to reading, like this is, I think we still need volunteers. So it's not that we're like, oh, cool, we have all these separate programs. It's like reading is still helpful, I think, no matter what they're working on. So.
But if you want to specifically do that, like maybe work with one kid through the year, because I work in another program, reading a literacy program, and I've found working with the same kid consistently, you develop a rapport and you get to know their strengths and their areas they really need to work on, and you can really help them improve if you have that relationship. If you're just kind of randomly reading, I mean, that's helpful. It's not, there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just wondering if that's how the program is set up, or if you just they don't have homework and you just read with them.
No, that's a great point. I think you're right. It does help if you have the same consistency of students. And I think all the sites do it a little differently. Correct me if I'm wrong, those of you who are from different sites, but every site lets you, the volunteer, choose if you prefer to work with one student the whole year, or if you want to switch around. So I think it depends on you all if you want to stay with one. And I guess if your student's not there the week that you're the week that you're there, you could find someone else to work with. But I think you're right. The consistency is nice because then you can still say like, okay, I'll see you next week, or we'll finish this book next week. Like that's helpful if you're working with the same student. But if you're reading with any student, I see what you're saying. Like it's still helpful, but it's not as focused as if you're with one student. So yeah, I think that's up to, I think the site, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you go to your site, I'm pretty sure they let you, if you're like, hey, I want to work with the same student, I'm pretty sure they're pretty open to that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was going to jump in and say that it is a little, I actually had the question, like, are the reading buddies the same or are they different? And it is going to be during that same volunteer/homework time that people come into the centers, and people that have been doing homework, and then when homework's done and then they do the reading, we absolutely want them to have these tips as to how to do that not better, but whatever, some tips on how to do that well. But if you're specifically interested in doing a lot of reading, you know, as you were just saying, working one-on-one with a student who's really behind and needs that help, please talk to the staff at your center. And I'm going to be emailing all the staff saying, these are the great volunteers who were at the training last night, and they are ready to go with their reading tips. So, so they might be reaching out to you as well.
Okay, thanks.
All right, 2 more questions. How about Catherine?
Yeah, so I have 2 questions actually. So the first one is I am actually a psych nurse and I work with child and adolescent psychiatry. And one of the things we have on our unit is like the PBAS, positive behavioral intervention and support. So our system for kids is they get stamps for good behaviors or like exhibiting ours is like the 3 Bs, like safe, responsible, and respectful. And then they can, you know, earn a prize based off the amount of stamps that they earn for exhibiting positive behaviors. Is there anything like that included in this program, or is that like something we could do? Like if we're working with the same kid long term, like, you know, you said like you give stickers, like you get this certain amount of stickers and you can win like a small prize or something like that, just as an added encouragement. And then the other question I had is if I haven't volunteered with you guys yet. So if you start as a reading buddy, are you able to help with other stuff as well? Or would you just be reading buddy?
So yeah, to answer your question, yes, you could do both, help with homework and reading, be a reading buddy. And to answer the other part, yes, each site has like a behavior chart and there's like clips that students can move up or down, and it's like ready to learn or like excellent and different things. And then there's like warning or like parent contact and things like that. So they all know about that. If you're like, well, it depends on how you want to talk to them. You know, if you don't want to say like, oh, we're going to move your clip, but like they're aware if their like behavior is not great, that you could be like, oh, let me go tell the site staff. Like they know whoever their site staff are. If you're like, oh, Miss Adriana, Miss Sayla, they're like, oh, like they're, but sometimes that might, I mean, it might not, like some students are like, yeah, call my parent. So it depends on like the behavior, what's going on there. But yes, there are things, there's ways to reward them. And then there's also, I believe they get a prize depending on like how many points or stickers they get from their site, things like that. So
Okay, awesome.
there are prizes built in. There's also snacks, like we feed the children and things like that. So yes, if there's things you want to give them, or if you want to tell like the staff, they're like, oh, they were really good today, like they deserve like a little something extra, like I'm sure there's ways they could incorporate that.
Awesome, thank you.
Jean, did you have a question? Your hand was up and now your hand's down. I don't know if you timed out or.
No, I'm here. Are the site word lists at every location, or is that something that we buy them and bring them, or how does that work?
So yeah, you don't have to buy them. They're actually online, which we can send you the link if you want, but also each site should have a copy on hand, or we can print them out for you before you all come if you'd like, if that's something you all would like to do. So I have a copy with me at all times, but I'm not always at the same sites as you all at the same time, but each site should have copies of them or flashcards and things.
Yeah, please send the link.
Okay, I can do that.
I saw Mackie first and then Yvonne, but let's start with Mackie. Another question?
Yes. Sorry, I kind of forgot the question. Oh, no, I do have the question. With school and stuff, I get really busy during the weekdays. So would it be easy for me to like move the day I go in from like Tuesday to Thursday, or, you know?
So once again, this might be our standard answer. It depends on the center, but basically, consistency is great, but we know that doesn't always happen. And so you would email the person, each center has 2 staff members. So you would email those people and say, gosh, this week I'm too busy on Tuesday. Can I come on Thursday? Often the answer is yes. It might mean that the student or students that you've been working with are working with someone else, but either you could split up your group or maybe you'll be assigned to work with a different student. So I would say that it often works out and that communication is important. So,
Okay.
There's
thank
also
you.
a calendar that helps. So like sometimes the day that you might want to come might be a holiday or a day that we don't have programs. So it's always good to check before you, like, don't just show, I'm sure you wouldn't just show up, but message first. Cause sometimes like Laura said, we'll definitely be happy to have you. It just might depend on the day.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yvonne? Nope, you're on mute.
Oh, you're muted.
Yes, I just want to put in a plug for the ladies at the Virginia Gardens Complex. They're well organized. I walk in and they're handing me what I'm going to do for the hour. So I really appreciate that. So that way there's very little prep, or there's no prep work for me other than making sure I'm there on time. So just putting in a good plug for them for being well organized.
Awesome. Thank you. And I hope that doesn't intimidate any of the newer volunteers. We're not asking you to show up with a curriculum. Our staff are super organized. And as Michelle was saying, any book, any reading, we've got a lot of material there. So if the students don't have homework and if you came in after a busy day, you can just pick up a book and start reading and taking turns reading. And so you don't need to be coming in with the plan.
Right. There's also games, and if the staff should be able to show you where all these things are. Like each site has different sections for like literacy, this and that. But even the student might be able to help you if you're like, hey, where's that sight word game or something like that. So that could be fun to have the student, because they love showing things off, you know. So they're like, oh, here's my backpack, here's this, here's that. So maybe you could be like, oh, can you give me a tour? I'm new here. Like, where's the stuff? I mean, like, I've been coming for over a year and there's still things I'm learning at each. I work at all the sites, so like figuring out where stuff is good for the students to be like, oh yeah, this is in this spot. So
I have a quick question. I've only worked on, worksheets. Oh, is that worksheets? So are the books sort of set up in a way that you could, like, by age or grade or something like that? Is it easy to figure out, or do the kids know where to go, I guess is the question.
So yeah, great question. Each site does it differently, but I believe they're all set by level right now. So by like grade level. So I know at Woodbury Park, for example, they did stickers on the back of on the book, and it tells you like, there's like a poster that says like, for first grade, it's this color, for this grade, it's this color. But each site has like different, and like some of the books might be on a cart at Gates of Boston, for example, for the older students in the university. So I know each site does a little differently, but either the site staff should be able to help you with that, or the students might know. Hopefully they paid attention when the site staff told them at the beginning of the year, like, hey guys, these books are for your grade. This, like, they should know that, but you can ask the site staff at each site.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right, I have a question. What if your student picks a book that's way too hard and really long, like 200 pages or something?
Great question, Laura. So yeah, we do encourage them to want to read, and sometimes they'll just pick books that look interesting on the cover. So if you're reading it with them, you could start it with them. Like there's many things you could do, I guess. You could start the book with them and then show them like, oh, are you sure you want to read this? This one's kind of hard. Do you want to pick something that we can read together? Or you could say like, oh, let's try another one. So maybe, I never want to tell a student no, but sometimes, as you all know, picking a book that might be too hard might discourage them later and they might not want to read anymore. So encourage them the best you can. Like maybe bring it with you. Like, oh yeah, let's bring that one. Let's bring another one too.
And then what if they pick a book that's way too easy?
That's a good point too. So for some of our students, they are struggling a lot. So it's hard to say what's too easy, but it's good if sometimes that's good that they're practicing with the same book. So maybe if they're doing it and they're giving you like what happens, if you could ask tougher questions about it, like, okay, cool. Maybe the actual words in it are easy, but maybe the concepts in it or like trying to explain what happened to someone else might be harder. So there's still, like I said, every book has some value in it. It just depends on what you're working on or what the process is. Or you could have them write like a different ending or something like that. Like if you want to make it harder, like, okay, let's work on an alternate ending. Like, what do you think could have happened if this, or like, or sometimes the book's too easy, but maybe there's other books in the series or similar books.
Cool, thanks. All right, I see some volunteers on this call who've been volunteering with us for a while. Do any of you have any tips for your fellow, especially your incoming volunteers? Not to put you on the spot, but if you want to share anything, helpful.
Hey, this is Sahar from Fort Henry. Well, I think most, the best advice I can give is like just to try to have fun with the kids and like be as engaged as possible in the story. And like Michelle said, asking questions, but also kind of like thinking about, oh my gosh, would you do the same thing if you were in this position? What do you think about this or that? And just really getting them to enjoy the story and like fall in love with reading a little bit and just see how immersive it can be. So I always find that to be really fun, and I just try to be as animated as possible. I mean, I also like do voices and stuff, so that's just me, but it's a good way to bond with them, to just really be engaged in the story yourselves.
Awesome.
That's a
Thank
great
you.
point. Yes.
Yeah.
And we,
All right, I
the
saw
students
Sally's
love
hand up. Sally?
Oh, I just wanted to say that I think you'll find that the centers, the staff of the centers are extremely well organized. They're really helpful. They can, if you get to a point where you're not quite sure what to do next, they have lots of suggestions. I mean, you're definitely not out there on your own. And I'm sure Laura will agree with that because we both go to Harvey Hall.
For sure, you're definitely not alone. There's other, I mean, as you can see on this call, we have lots of volunteers. So if you have questions, I'm sure you all can see each other there, but also at the sites, or any of us are happy to help. Like if you have a question, like, oh, this isn't working so well, or this is working well, like what can I do?
Great. Laura, did you want to add something?
Well, I'm with the child, about 45 minutes probably. Child picks a couple of books and we'll read the books, but we may take a break. We may write some of the words on the board or draw a picture of some of the animals and write the word on the board or on a piece of paper, or play a game with some of those words. We might not be reading the whole time, but using the words in the books to do other activities to reinforce them. And usually if there's something to color or or an animal they can draw, then it just kind of, I try to direct it to reinforce the story or the words that we've used.
That's a great point.
Usually it keeps them more interested, I think.
For sure. Yeah, that's a great point. Being a reading buddy is not just reading, right? You all know there's many ways to be a better reader or work on literacy, and just even talking to them, writing, spelling, all these things. We're telling stories, drawing.
Yeah, I love all these ideas. Jean, did I see you with your hand up again?
Yeah, but you answered it. I was a book buddy in Alexandria in the pre-pandemic times, and it was a really, there were just like a set, I'm going to say 5 or 6 things that we did every day with the kids, every session with the kids. Mm-hmm. And it involved reading, and it involved, like beginnings and ends of words and these sort of game things. But this is a different program, right? Yeah. So it's not, you don't have that structure, and you don't have this definite where every day you read and every day you write. I mean, every day you're going to read, but you're not going to do these certain activities every time.
So,
exactly. Yeah, we're not, but you could bring that in if you wanted with the students that you're working with. If the students enjoy that, then, if you're coming in with outside ideas, that's great.
Yeah, we're all very open to learning. So if you have something that works, then we're happy to use it. We do have like structure, and all the sites have a schedule of what goes on or like what they plan for the day. But yeah, the time with volunteers is open.
Good, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I've really been learning a lot. Does anybody else have anything they want to share or any other questions? This is great for me. Hopefully for you, but